Hi Luke. So welcome to
Hey.
welcome to House of Visionaries series, and we're here today in Brewdog, channeling our inner Peter Crouch.
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed that this isn't the place that Peter sits to do his
Yeah.
podcast. I was really gutted when they told us that,
Yeah.
that's not the case.
He's in the room next door, isn't he? Not
No,
at the moment,
I
but
wouldn't
normally
be
he's in
here.
the room.
I'd be there just getting autographs if he was.
But although not Peter Crouch, we have just had the Brewdog founder in this exact seat. I heard.
Yeah.
So high expectations. We got Peter Crouch and the Brewdog founder doing podcasts. So I'm not sure if we can live up to that, but we'll give it a go.
I mean, you see if we could put a tab behind the bar. I mean, he's worth 300 million, so maybe you can put a wee tab on behind the bar. That'd be lovely.
For after. Awesome. All right, buddy. Well, basically, so House of Visionaries is all about people, talent, and scale strategy. And today we've got Luke Eaton joining us, who's a legend in all things data and talent ops. I'm sure lots of people will follow his content on LinkedIn. But do you want to maybe give a brief overview and kind of background into your journey in TA?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me on at this event. I think it's really cool what you're doing. So in terms of myself, yeah, I'm Luke, and I'm currently the head of talent operations for a health and wellness company based out of Ukraine. But for the past 10 years or so, my role has been to embed into hyperscaling businesses and just acting as some de facto recruitment leader. My remit is to really stand up a business from a talent point of view to make sure that they have the systems, processes, tools, best practices needed to scale, and make sure, more importantly, that people isn't a blocker or a barrier to their investment milestones. So they've been given 25 million Series A, making sure that money is being spent in the most effective way possible, and they're going to hit those milestones to investment. So that's what I do in various sort of forms and certain various ways. It's always a different challenge. It's always a lot of fun. Before I was in recruitment, I was actually a magician for 10 years. I was a professional magician for 10 years. It sounds weird. And I went around Europe doing sort of corporate events, working for companies like Coke, Sony, who's bringing a bit of magic to their trade shows and things like that. Before that, I was a croupier working in a casino. Before then, I was a chemist. Before then, I was a window cleaner. And that's me as a childhood, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, amazing. What story, right?
Yeah, well, I think my careers advisor obviously was quite drunk when they. There you go.
Amazing. We were speaking earlier. You haven't had the pack of cards out for a while, but you still got a few tricks up your sleeve to say.
Yeah, I mean, I can make a talent budget disappear pretty quickly. No, yeah, I've not really since my kids were born. I've not really been able to practice any magic, but I do the odd little thing. I'm going to be one of those embarrassing magic dads. I think that's my goal.
Amazing. Well, in terms of like the theme today, do you want to talk through the theme and what we're going to spend the next kind of however long talking about and unpicking? So what's the theme and the topic that we're going to sort of cover today in your words, and why do you think it's important?
Sure. I think it's a theme that I hope is on the mind of every recruitment leader who's had their eyes open for the past few years, which is that we're going to be in a tight spot this year. Over the past 2022, 2023, there's been a massive reduction in investment, and obviously that's had a huge negative knock-on effect in terms of redundancies, particularly in talent function. And a lot of that was exacerbated by really poor workforce planning, right? We're throwing huge amounts of human capital at a problem of growth, which is more recruiters, more hires, and then of course that's led to pretty tragic reduction in the number of recruiters in these tech businesses. So in the future, as we ramp up in 2024, as more investment comes in and we're growing more, no business and no investor is going to want us to do that again. No investor is going to say, right, here's 25 million, doesn't matter, just grow. So we're going to be under much tighter, our budgets are going to be tighter, and the way we operate and the way we grow is going to have to be more intelligent and more efficient. So we're kind of stuck in this sort of box where we're not going to have the resources we once did, but they're still going to have the same growth milestones. They still have to grow as a business. So how do we make sure that as the revenue generating of the bit of the business does this, the operational non-revenue generating bit, which talent sort of sits in, doesn't do this at the same time? How do we do it like this? Well, the only way we can do that is with systems, processes, tools, best practices.
Yeah.
So, and how do we reduce the level of effort to make a hire by an order of magnitude? So that's the theme for me, is hiring efficiently. I believe that efficiency is going to be a more foundational metric than the number of hires, which sounds a bit weird, right, from a recruitment point of view. But if you have an efficient process or a low level of effort to make one hire, that scales infinitely. Whereas making 500 hires because we've just been given Series A, that can be done in any number of expensive and very detrimental ways. So for me, that's the theme. It's how do recruitment leaders do what they have to do, but in a much, much more efficient and intelligent way than they were prompted to do through the market forces in 21, 22, 23.
Yeah, I think that those kind of like heyday of we need to hire 500 people, we'll hire at all costs, just go and make it happen. I think those days are definitely over, and I think efficiency will be the flavour for at least the next couple of years. I think probably longer, or at least until the pain of 2022 and 2023 is out of people's minds, and then the crazy days might come back. But certainly for the short to mid-term of our careers moving forward, it's going to be around efficiency and scaling, but scaling sensibly and efficiently is going to be the flavour.
I think if it's not necessarily a bad thing. We are in a spot where we have to figure out new ways of hiring. I think overall that's a good thing. But I think for the recruitment leaders who really nail the next year or two, and really figure out ways to present to the business methods of reducing the level of effort to make a hire, when it comes to the end points of their career or the next role or the role after that, you can say to those businesses, like, this is how I nailed this very tricky part of 2024, 2025. This is how I recruited in a lean way, and that's going to be very attractive to the next generation of invested businesses.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So in talking about like efficient hiring or efficiency, where would you start with that? How would you start to break that topic down? And so we've got these, say, recruitment leaders in a box, and they're getting squeezed. That box is getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter to the point where they have to look at efficiency. I now have to do something because I don't have the resources I used to have. I don't have the budget I used to have, but I still need to deliver.
Yeah.
Kind of where would you start on that journey, or what type of advice would you give to sort of like unpick that efficiency for someone who's looking at it now?
Well, we could talk for hours about the kind of the low-level operational stuff, and I want to make sure we get some low-level stuff in the conversation, but I suppose we have to start with some kind of high-level definitions, like what do we mean by efficiency and what are we measuring. So the business is always going to want to know how many hires, right? What headcount are we responsible for? But we need to start measuring level of effort. So how much cost is it to make a hire in terms of people, time, and money? So the only way to measure that is with actually getting on top of your data. So if anyone's ever read anything I've ever said, I've ever put down in LinkedIn, I'm a bit of a data head. We need to track the basic sort of, I call them the three Cartesian axes of a process, which is the volume, the conversion, and the capacity. So no matter what state your ATS is in, no matter how dysfunctional a process is, you need to really prioritize measuring these quantitative metrics over just the qualitative metrics that's easy to pull out of an ATS, like start dates and time and stage and this type of stuff, relatively easy to extract. You need the quantitative measures of how much did your recruiters do in that period of time. So volume, conversion, which is a function of your volume, so what's the pass-through rate, the efficiency of each step, and more importantly, capacity, which is not as often measured, but because all bottlenecks are capacity problems, and scaling businesses, the main problem you're going to get is bottlenecks affecting your throughput of your business, then you have to start measuring capacity. So not how many have you done, but how many could have you have done in a certain time period. So how many tech interviews can you do in a week? Maybe it's 2. Okay, well, how much volume can we produce to create 2 interviews? Any more is a waste of money and a waste of effort. And then that if you can calculate that, then all that saved time can be used to elevate the bottleneck. Maybe get more interviewers in, so that way there's more capacity. So then that volume comes through into more hires. So just get on top of those 3 Cartesian axes of volume, conversion, and capacity. Once you've done that, you've got all these secondary measures that really are going to help you think about efficiency, which is throughput and identifying bottlenecks. Throughput being the number of processes essentially turning people into employees, right? So how many people, X people, get to Y employees in Z time frame? Like if you can measure that throughput, you can then see what threatens that throughput. A good example would be when to use an agency. So let's say you're a scaling business. Is there a good time to use an agency? Yeah, of course, there's always a good time to use an agency. Let's say you have a Salesforce architect role. Now, one of your recruiters could very easily fill that role, but if they were looking at like a high volume role instead, software engineers, they could have hired that Salesforce architect, but at the cost of not hiring 3 software engineers. So that's threatening the throughput. Someone's making less hires because they're on this niche role. So maybe an agency could take the Salesforce architect role, and then your recruiters can get on with, the roles that they know. So first and foremost, just getting your data under control and getting a visual idea of how your business works. How does your business turn people into employees? I could talk for hours about that, but that's kind of the first kind of thing.
From your experience in terms of where the sector is at in terms of data, how many businesses do you think or leaders that are experiencing this problem and they now need to default to data and have a look at that? From what you've seen, how many leaders will have that and have it accessible for them to kind of pull out and start using? Do you think those data foundations will be there for the leaders, or do you think they might take that advice and go and look for it and it's just not there, or they can't get it out, or they can't use it? How easy do you think that's going to be for people based on what you've seen?
I think that's a really good question. I would say it's one of the. I've never been into a single business, and so much of my role has been moving into businesses and embedding for a period of a couple of years and helping them through the scaling journey. I've never once been in a business that has the data that they need to measure recruitment as a process. Which, if it was any other piece of the business, would be terrifying, right? If you went to the sales team and you were on the hook for a certain amount of sales for an investment, and you said, how many leads do you have? And they went, I don't know. And you said, what's the conversion of your leads? And they went, I don't know. And then they said, well, what's the lifetime customer value? And you went, I don't know.
Yeah.
You'd be like, everyone in that team's getting fired. It would be obvious that that's really, really dysfunctional function. But that tends to be the standard in recruitment. I think it's because there aren't any standard sort of methodologies in recruitment strategy. So I often have to start with a spreadsheet. I say to my recruiters, this is a week's worth of your work. This is everything that you do in a week. Just put a number next to each one each week. Doesn't take long, but you can start with something as simple as that and be able to make much better strategic decisions than pulling out data from an ATS that may have had no best practices, no governance over how it works. Total mess. You don't know what kind of platform it is. So I think even just starting with something as simple as measuring quantitative data of output with a spreadsheet would put you ahead of the game when you're starting to think about how do we scale and what bits of this process is going to threaten that scale.
Yeah, I also agree with your point. I'm a little bit further away from our programs now and kind of the inner working, so I couldn't comment on all of our live stuff, but certainly historically when I was a bit closer, I've never been into an environment where the data was all there, the data was needed, and I think it's a really interesting example how you compare that to other business functions.
Yeah.
And I completely agree and have seen similar things, and we've recently hired a new global management accountant, and I see that global management accountant working with our chief finance officer, and they're already speaking the same language from day one, because there's those underlying best practice that they get to study through SEMA, but also the finance profession has hundreds of years of best practice been built into every function. So there's this baseline that everybody is working from in other functions like sales and finance and supply chain and project management with Prince 2 and stuff like that. You peek it kind of into the TA functions and you look at the underlying baseline that's there, and there's often nothing. Every single business that we go into will have a wildly different setup in terms of data or their best practice around process or how they're going to market, basically all the fundamental elements of a core TA function. That I'm very rarely see any form of like best practice that's built in.
Yeah.
And then from that, when you've got the best practice, so efficiency for me is just the ability to repeat the same action consistently really well. But if you don't have that underlying best practice that sits there, it's really, really hard to build in efficiency and go through that cycle. But I think as a profession, like touching on that point where other functions do it well and they're scrutinised, like we're not scrutinised as much.
Yeah.
But we're also not then respected as much. Like when people aren't scrutinising us, maybe they don't expect better from us.
Expectations are low, right?
Yeah.
And I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Is that TA aren't viewed as a strategic function. Now, if you put away everything and just say, well, is it a strategic function for a growing business? It is, because it threatens the growth of the business. So it has to be a strategic function by definition. But is it viewed as a strategic function? No, I don't think it is, and that is a problem. But it's also kind of it's quite exhilarating opportunity for us because we have to then, as you say, like mature TA's best practices and operations and just get even a common vocabulary together so we can start building and training recruiters with what we can say is credible best practice in a way that the CEO and the C-suites go, okay, this person's speaking at a strategic level now. Because we don't really speak at a strategic level. We're very good at solving operational problems, but we've never really had much experience. If you think where most recruiters come from, we all have this sort of service-led mentality. We've come from agencies or we've come from mid-level TA roles and we've kind of climbed up the way. So at what point do you start learning about like project management, program management, sort of stakeholder engagement at the C-suite, the wider business context that informs budget, the commercials, all of this informs decision making and strategy. When does a recruiter get to learn any of that? Never. So that actually brings us on to the second sort of low-level thing I really wanted to focus on, which is governance.
Yeah.
And the governance piece is something that we really, really lack, which is essentially, like, to crudely put it, is who is responsible for what and when. Now, as recruiters, we're used to the hiring managers, CEOs, essentially deciding how recruitment happens. But in actual fact, that would be mad in any other function, right? You'd want your domain leaders or your people with the domain space knowledge to decide and inform the C-suite how things work, right? So I think what we lack in governance is being able to go to founders, CEOs, CFOs, and say, here's a RACI chart, here's our recruitment process, and next to his RACI chart, when it comes to changing process, I'm responsible, this person's accountable, you'll be informed, they'll be consulted. If you want to go to an agency, if you feel agency use is necessary, I'm responsible, they're accountable, this person's informed, this person's informed. What do we do now? What's standard operating procedure? It's whoever's got the budget decides, I don't like this talent acquisition professional, I'm going to go to that agency, that person that hired me a couple of years ago. That's crazy, isn't it? Like just someone just deciding to not use your process, and just go off book. If it was any other function, if you were in infrastructure or if you were in like product, and then the CTO said to an engineering manager, right, you're responsible for this feature, and they went, yeah, it's all done. I don't like AWS. I know we all use AWS, but I decided to do my bit in Azure because I prefer that. You're getting fired, right? It's like, well, you've destroyed the economy of scale that we've set up. There's legal ramifications around this. So what happens when a CEO or a CFO goes, right, here's the budget for TA, here's the growth that they're going to give us, and then someone who's not responsible for any of that says, I'm just going to use a different service, a third-party service. Why? I don't know. I don't have any domain space in TA. I just like the person better, or I have a better relationship. This thing can't be allowed, but it is allowed because the head of TA, the CPO, allows it. It's not the hiring manager's fault for wanting a service that they understand or have experience with, but we have not built any governance at the strategic level. And what does that mean? This trickles down into hundreds of operational problems that affect efficiency, right? Extra process steps being put in by hiring managers, people going to agency last minute, wasting weeks of sourcing time that we could have spent on other roles. All of that could have been solved with a RACI chart and a 10-minute segment in a CEO's quarterly meeting.
Yeah.
But we don't think that way. So it is a strategic function, but we're not deserving of that conversation yet. We're not mature enough, and that's the exciting bit with getting us there, is, I think, the exciting bit. So I could go for hours about boring stuff like governance, so I hope that's okay.
I don't think it is boring. I think it's really important. And I think that, so the takeaway there, just to summarise, is you need to build the governance structure, but go higher so it cascades down. And I've heard you talk about that before, is kind of like starting at the top, going and having that conversation and making sure the governance wrapped in right at the top. And then that governance will flow through the whole business. And if you do it the other way around, you're going to get problems. But
and if you there's no excuse. Like, size isn't an excuse either. Like, if it's a startup or if it is going into an enterprise business, people need to understand that decisions have weight. Leaders' decisions have more weight, but they also have inertia. So it's harder to change. So if you make a poor decision, and you mentioned it before about like the number of hires not being this sort of, at any cost is a problem. Well, let's say you need to make a huge number of hires, so the leader thinks to themselves, well, we need these first 25 hires to go perfectly. We don't want to miss our first investment milestone. That's not going to be, the fund manager's not going to be happy about that. All right, well, let's just throw every agency at it. Okay, it's going to be like a $15,000 cost per hire minimum, but we need this first bit to go. That maybe is a sensible short-term bit of thinking. But as soon as you start doing that, there's no agents to change that. Nobody else is going to be able to change that. So if that person does it, if the CEO says it's okay, then the VP of IT is going to do it. The VP of IT is going to see it, then the chief marketing officer is going to do it. And then the inertia of that happens. So all of a sudden, these 10 hires at 16 grand, 160 grand, becomes 1.6 million because it scales up. No one changes it. So that's why it's really important for TA leaders to be able to say no to the people that for 90% of their careers were customers they really don't want to say no to. Now it's part of the value of your role is to say no to these people in the right context.
I couldn't agree more. And what's the next area of efficiency then? So that's two core areas of efficiency there. Where's, if there was a third key area of efficiency you would want to talk about?
Well, I think that change is interesting enough. Like, we can measure the change with data. Governance is important, but also how do we make the change and the improvements continuous? So basically setting up a cycle of continuous improvement. How do you go about doing that? So the good news is, like a lot of other pieces of TA, are more mature businesses out there that we can borrow from. So I talk about lean recruitment and marginal gains. That comes straight from DevOps, and they nicked it from car manufacturing, right? So cool. Governance and RACI chart, that's project management and business strategy. We can nick that. Continuous improvement is a core part of software engineering. How do you continuously improve and marginally improve, like software release? So you can use similar and similar tools and processes to measure. So I would suggest, and it's something I always try to build into a business as soon as possible, is what's our conversation with stakeholders at the operational level, at the lowest level. So 30-minute, sync up every week, a decisioning session with a hiring manager, and make sure that our senior recruiters or talent acquisition managers are enabled and trained to deliver that, to just get decisions made before Friday, so candidates aren't waiting for the weekend. I think most recruitment leaders could agree that probably already do that. So setting up a retrospective. So again, this is something that software developers do quite a lot. Every quarter, a 90-minute session with functional leaders or whoever's to measure the performance of the previous quarter, look at the data, look at the conversions, and look at areas where it could be a D&I piece that's failing, or it could be the actual process, it could be volume, it could be a bottleneck, whatever the problems are. Identify those problems in the retrospective, have a conversation about the problems, and then come up with a specific plan about what you're going to fix and how. And then over the course of that quarter, you as a leader execute on that. And then what you do in the following quarter, you look at the previous quarter. How well did we do? So let me give you an example. Let's say we have a very low pass rate for our technical tests. All the domain level sort of stuff is 40%. We need it to be 70%, something like that. Then that's something you can specifically identify, have a conversation with the leaders and with some of the hiring managers. Why do we think this is? Is the tech test too hard? Is it not being delivered very well? Are we missing the mark on terms of specific skills? And then we decide that, what plan we're going to have, and then we measure that conversion. And it means the whole talent team can focus on one specific problem. Everyone's part of the solution, and then again we can measure it the following quarter. So every single quarter we're working on something new. So even if I get hit by a bus, all of those processes have that inertia. They can still, like the talent acquisition manager can literally stand in my place and deliver that retrospective. And the last benefit of that is you're speaking their language. You get a lot of credibility from your hiring managers and technical functional leaders, because that's essentially how they're improving every other bit of their business. So again, we're bringing ourselves up in terms of a level of maturity just by saying, right, this is where we are, this is how we're going to improve, and this is how we're going to continue to improve over time. This is our methodology for improvement.
Yeah.
So I'd say continuous improvement is really, really valuable, but in the long term.
Yeah. Do you think the volatility that we experience in TA most prevents us from building efficiency and process and continuous improvement? So what I mean by that is, if you've got a leader of a TA function, they're very rarely there longer in their role longer than, say, 2 or 3 to 4 years because of the volatility we see in the market. So lots of redundancies, lots of strategic change, lots of like movement. So by the time they start to get through the function and building the best practice in, they're probably gone, or the whole function's gone, and then a year later they got to start again. They start to rebuild it again, and then it gets chopped and it's gone. So do you think that does play a huge limiting factor in even if as a community and as an industry we were so passionate about building it, the fact that kind of it gets shut down every 3 years is going to prevent it from happening, and it's a blocker? Do you think that do you think that is maybe a reality, and B, if you are a business, you're going to have this volatility, and maybe you have to make the decisions you don't want to make, how can companies, I suppose 2 questions, can leaders go on that journey to build it in such volatile markets, and how could companies maybe support building best practice in a volatile market? So how could you influence that world so you still get the journey, you get the best practice built in, but in such a volatile environment?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, my input on this is very skewed towards the faster growing businesses. That's just been the role that I took. So if this was some 10% a year growth enterprise, maybe my input isn't valid. But for the kind of faster growing businesses and the technical businesses, I would say first of all, like, that volatility is not necessarily a bad thing, because I've worked with I've coached sort of TA managers that have gone on to be the heads of TA for smaller businesses, which is wonderful. It's a very proud thing, something that I feel proud of. But what they tend to do is they get very good at scaling a business at a certain level. They enjoy the environment of maybe a startup or a pre-seed, and they tend to just stay in that little thermocline, that little tropical fish. Like, they're very good in this little thermocline. And then when the business starts to get more corporate and more structured, they start to get bored, or they start to feel constrained, or maybe their input or their impact isn't as high. So a lot of people get addicted to that feeling of high impact, staying really close with the founders.
Yeah, I can see that.
And you can see why that would be fun, right? So there are a lot of heads of TA that just want to stay in that space. So it can be healthy, because essentially you're getting out of a certain skill set and into another. If I was the CEO of a business and there was someone like that who took me up to 135, 150 plus people, and then all of a sudden they're not quite as skilled at building programs of work cross-functionally. We're talking about an employer brand, but we're not bringing it, so we don't understand how comms cascade through a bigger business, then it is probably a right time for a change. The problem with a lot of businesses is they don't give TA enough credit. They just go for whatever they think their need is, and that's always focused on people, right? Who can grow the business from 130 to 1,000. Business from 130 to 1,000 with a retention rate of 30% because they did it terribly. Cost the business $5 million. But all they see is the people. So I would say that the volatility piece isn't as much a concern. What you mentioned about best practices, that's the concern. And my question, and about if there's any tier leaders watching, I always think to myself, if I got hit by a bus next quarter, what could somebody else do in my shoes that they couldn't do right now?
Yeah.
So I always have to think like, what's the best practice, and just get into like a daily writing habit of like documenting processes. So wherever you're going to decide, if you're going to decide something in a meeting or on the fly, it needs to be written down.
Yeah.
Just get used to write a process, a policy document, template, and just get used to whenever you're going to make a decision, write it down as a policy, stick it on Confluence or Notion or wherever your wiki is. Just get used to building that, and you'll be amazed how, after a year, maybe 9 months to a year, how much of a solid body of work that becomes. And then it becomes a lot easier. People start asking you less questions because there's policies there. Again, if I got hit by a bus, someone could read that. I think we were talking earlier, this is very nerdy stuff. This is, you don't have to do this, but flowcharts.
Yeah.
Again, stealing that straight from manufacturing and software developers, you can build processes into very detailed flowcharts, and someone could follow it with their finger.
Yeah.
You know, they could literally just go from here to here to here, and if I get hit by a bus here, it's fine. They can follow the finger.
Yeah.
So I think volatility is not too much a problem, but really focusing on best practices, that's the continuity piece that you really need to work on.
And I suppose I think you're absolutely right. And I think if you do that right, you leave it there.
Yeah.
So if you do if the business does downsize, if you do have to change the function, the best practice gets documented.
Yeah.
So that flowchart will never leave if it's done correctly and it's embedded into the business and it's there for the next person to pick up and follow with their finger. So getting that stuff in is definitely right. It makes me smile. You talk about getting hit by a bus. I remember my
that makes you smile.
but hopefully you don't. But I remember my placement year, like a 19-20-year-old like kid doing my placement year and maybe not being as keen to document processes and document things and stuff like that. I remember my manager getting frustrated with me and standing up and saying to me like, you don't understand, if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, I've still got to fucking carry on running this business. So you document it, you put it in the system, you do everything. It's like, it's that moment you go, well, he's probably right. Like it does need to be documented. It's not just about you and you're like, oh, I don't want to do it, it's a pain, I can't be bothered, it's not a priority, I'm not interested in it. It is the bigger picture, looking at the business, and if you were to leave, if things were to change, what have you left behind?
Yeah.
Where's the legacy? Where's the processes? Where's the structure? Where's the rigor? The governance that's been left behind that's going to help this business go to the next level.
Absolutely. There's also like a people leadership piece as well. Like if you're documenting stuff but then not training other recruiters how to see and build those habits, then you're also not doing a good job. And again, you get hit by a bus. Yeah, those policies will last as long as doesn't change. But then if there's no one behind you documenting, then they have to hire externally. But I think it's always a good indicator of sort of leadership material I see in like senior recruiters who get good at writing stuff down, get good at kind of understanding and having a sensibility that their rec load isn't the only thing that exists in a business, you know.
I think that thing is the thing that's the difference between scaling and not scaling as well, by the way. Like we're talking about it a lot at the moment in our business is the ability to do those things is what will allow businesses to scale. Okay, so moving on, are there three or maybe 1, 2, 3 things that are more maybe transactional things that are things that people could go and actually implement and do around efficiency? So if someone's listened to this and gone, yeah, I think that's inspired me to make my function as efficient as I possibly can. It's a skill I'm going to have to build into my function. Yeah. Are there any like quick wins or very small things people could do to kind of move them along that curve as soon as possible?
Yeah, I can chuck out 3 things. Before I do, I think, again, I like putting the low-level stuff into context. We're talking about efficiency versus volume and speed, velocity, which is all the CEOs care about when they get given a wheelbarrow full of cash. There's that analogy of the 2 race car drivers. So if you're both being told, like, essentially, you have to win this race, the first race car driver can say to themselves, right, I need to go as fast as possible. And that's a very sensible way to win a race, right? We go as fast as possible to win the race. And that way of thinking works until you hit the first curve. And then that person is just like a pizza on the side of a piece of concrete. The second race car driver can learn from that and go, actually, it's not how fast I go, it's how efficiently I take each curve. And that's what's going to get you to win the race. That's what's going to get hiring velocity long term and efficiency long term, is how do I deal with the bottlenecks? How do I deal with the curves efficiently? So it's really important, I think, to contextualize sort of the lower level stuff. In terms of the 3 quick wins, get a sheet or sort out your ATS so you can measure quantitative and not just qualitative data. So not just what's the what's the location of the offer that was made and the salary and all that stuff, but how many outreaches is this recruiter doing? How many screens does that make? How many of them were sourced? How many stage 1? How many stage 2, 3? Offer, hire, conversions, and capacities. Anyone can do that for free with a spreadsheet or with any other tool.
And in that, you talk about funnel.
Dealer's choice. Yeah. So you've got funnel metrics.
Creating like strong but basic funnel metrics, which are quite easy to build. And I'm obsessed with funnels and funnel metrics.
I think they're very under sort of respected. This is not just recruitment, any process. If you're manufacturing a car or if you're releasing software, you need these metrics. They are foundational metrics. And we are a bit easy-ozy about whether or not we measure them. No. If you want to be a really solid recruitment leader, first of all, a mid-level recruiter can do it for themselves if they want.
Yeah.
And the skills that they build, that scales up to the head of TA. So if you want to be the head of TA for a fast-growing business, and you may as well learn this stuff as a recruiter, because A, it's good for you. You can performance manage yourself. You can make yourself more efficient, which means you can make more hires for the same level of effort. Or, no one tells you this, for the same hires, like hit your target, do it for less effort, go pick your kids up from school, go to the gym, all the stuff that makes you a healthy, happy human being. So just get a spreadsheet and then start measuring for yourself. Track these 3 metrics. So number 1, governance. Learn about RACI charts. Learn about basic project management best practices. It's free. It's all over the internet. It's being used by every other function. And again, it can solve so many problems. Stop them happening in the first place by saying, wait a minute, who actually gets to decide this and why? Let's write this down and commit to it. CEO signs off on it, and then all of a sudden, the hiring manager with the Elon Musk syndrome can destroy your recruitment process. Yeah. So just learn about RACI charts and continuous improvement. Get a retrospective together. Just get a presentation, and then say to yourself, right, how would I measure this quarter's performance? Have a little piece where you can have conversations to leave it open, like a round robin sort of discussion about problems, and then like a little goal sort of table where you can write down what you're going to do, and then just get used to going to your leaders with this retrospective. This is the retrospective at the end of this quarter. This is how it's going to run, and we're going to do this every quarter. So all free. RACI charts free, spreadsheets free, presentation like Google Slides. But it adds so many layers of more mature strategic behavior in the business.
Yeah.
Builds so much more credibility for TA, solves a lot of operational problems, and continuously builds efficiency.
Yeah. I'm a huge advocate of funnels and data for efficiency. We're actually building our own internal tools at the moment, which are nearly ready after a long time, but with the ability to look at funnels based on a whole sector. So we take clean tech as an example.
Yeah.
Every single clean tech project that we have, what does that funnel look like? Yeah. So as a sector, we can see where bottlenecks might be. Are there issues at top of funnel? Are there issues at bottom of funnel? Is it in the middle? Where it might be? We can then drill that by project. We can drill that by hiring manager. We can drill that by business unit. We can drill all the way down to even recruiter. Say, right, let's look at one of our recruiters and look at their funnel.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes data is hard to get in a format where anyone can present it and understand it. Yeah. I've never ever seen someone look at a funnel and not get it.
Yeah,
at any level, from the CEO all the way down to a junior talent partner. Yeah. And I think that guidance around data and funnels and understanding efficiency through the funnel is such an easy way to look at a business or a recruiter or a business unit and go, okay, where are my bottlenecks? Where isn't it working? I think at the very, very basic level, someone's going to start somewhere. I would get very, very good at understanding funnel data and having that implemented at every layer for everyone. Yeah. It will very quickly highlight where the efficiencies can be won and where the bottlenecks sit.
It's a gold mine. It really is a gold mine. We're talking about it in the context of process. Yeah, that's perfect, because if you're taking like clean tech, you can then go to customers, different customers, and even pre-sales, and say like, this is our data for clean tech. These are the common problems. This is how we're going to solve it. rather than saying, hey, here's our spec candidate, let's put a name to a
Yeah.
face. It just puts you light years ahead. But also for performance management, when I'm managing multiple recruiters, so I've managed 21 recruiters at any one time, so a lot of direct reports. When data is transparent, they can start raising each other up. So instead of me having to be responsible for 21 people getting up the hill, someone who's got a really good outreach to screen, because I don't know, their copywriting is really good. That's really, really high. If somebody else doesn't have a very high outreach to screen, they know who to go to.
Yeah.
It's not me. And they go to that person and say, how are you getting so many candidates back? What are you saying? Can I copy or nurture campaigns? And they're all doing that with each other all at the same time. So somebody else has got a better offer, accept. Somebody else is really good with the tech. And it's a brilliant thing as a manager when you see them coming to your one-to-ones. And instead of me saying, let's identify this and then let's work on a problem, let's coach a solution, they're coming to me with a solution.
Yeah.
And they just want, I'm just marking homework.
I love it.
It's brilliant, right?
I love that.
And it's all not possible without the data,
Yeah.
and then the data being transparent to your direct reports.
Yeah, I could wax lyrical about funnels all day long. I know that for some people they're relatively basic, for some people they're not. From what I've seen of TA functions, I think every single recruiter should have a funnel, their own funnel, so they can see where their own efficiencies are, what they're good at and not good at. Like you mentioned, top funnel reach out ability versus controlling a candidate through the close at the end.
Yeah.
Where am I good, but also where are all my peers good and where can I learn from? I think every single recruiter should have their own funnel and know it intimately, and they should know the funnel of the business and the business unit and every. I think it's the. There's no magic bullet, there's no easy, but I think it is one of the easiest things you can implement quickly to find efficiencies.
And it's free.
Yeah.
That's the thing that blows my mind. It's not some...
And it's really easy as well. Like the data's
they've
there.
already done it.
You just put it into a little funnel. It can be done very, very easily by anyone at any level, which is what I love about it. And everyone will understand it. So you can go to your hiring manager who's giving you some pressure and say, look, let's have a look at the funnel for your business unit. Where can we get wins? Where's the efficiency that we can have? And break it down with them. They will understand it.
If you want to get really nerdy about it as well, funnels are great. Funnels is a function of two things, right? Your volume and then your conversion, which responds to the volume. Capacities are really important because you want to measure bottlenecks, right? But when you're presenting data like that to a stakeholder, it's like a sword and a shield. You know, your data, it protects you from harm, but you can also really make your point that can't really be you can't be argued against because they're looking at the numbers. I've been in situations where this happened to me twice, where I've been brought into a room with an angry CEO because not enough hires have been made. So there's supposed to be 20 hires and we made 10. And what's the solutions in the CEO's head? We need more. I need more. How do we get more sourcing done? Do we need more recruiters? Do we need a tool that gets more done? And I have to say to them, mathematically, we need to do like 30% less. And then you can't, if you don't have the data at your back, when you go into a room with the CEO and say, I'm going to do less. For the same money, I'm going to do less, and that's going to solve your problem. It's going to be a short meeting. And what you can do is point out that this bottleneck here is what's strangling your throughput. And if you put more volume, it's going to make it worse, not better. So you're going to say, well, my recruiters are actually going to do 30% less. That's going to feed the bottleneck exactly to where it is. And then that extra time, we're going to elevate that bottleneck. And then next year, you're going to make more hires for the same level of effort. There's no getting around that. That's not a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
That's maths.
Yeah.
You can't argue against 2 + 2 = 4.
I couldn't agree more. Huge fan of bottlenecks. Not a huge fan of bottlenecks. Huge fan of funnels to get rid of bottlenecks. Okay, so we'll look to wrap up. So at the end of each session, with the thought process, the interest being more visionary. Love to know from you and any guests that come on, like, what are you pumped about for like 24, 25, forever? But like, what gets you pumped about the future? What are the visions that you can see that get you super excited?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, for me, the main preoccupation in my career for the past probably 7 or 8 years is, well, first of all, have you read the Phoenix? There's a book called The Phoenix Project.
I haven't read it.
Have you read a book called The Goal?
No, I've not read
It's a fictionalized account of someone having a very bad time at work, and their businesses go into pot, like the old paradigm's not working. So in the Phoenix Project, it's basically about DevOps. If you speak to a DevOps engineer, they've read the Phoenix Project, and it's about like the old method of software development and how it kind of falls down. They can't release fast enough to please customers and make money. and then he happens across some old college professor who teaches him about lean and the theory of constraints and how to focus not on output but on bottlenecks and those types of things. And it's a fictionalized account of how that change happens. So it's going from one old paradigm to this new paradigm that is much more dynamic and inherently data driven. So that's happened in manufacturing 60 years ago, happened in software 20 years ago. Recruitment hasn't had that Phoenix project moment yet. That is so thrilling for me because we're at the beginning of a paradigm shift where we are in control strategically, where we can make data-driven decisions that can't be, that can't be sort of said no to by people's opinions. And we are the generation of recruiters who can, if we learn this and if we're on top of it, we can drive this new paradigm, this brand new way of recruiting that borrows from these more mature bits of business that is data-driven. And for me, that is absolutely thrilling. Because if I was saying before, like if you were started recruitment in like 1985 and you did 30 years of recruitment, what would you have done? Like you would have been an agency for 30 years, or you would have been in a kind of an admin style role for 30 years. But if you start your career now, or if there's someone like in this studio right now who's just started their first day today, and they said, "Luke, you're a data nerd, you're a recruitment person. What's my career going to look like in 30 years?" I'd be like, I have no idea, mate. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be thrilling. There's going to be all kinds of change. There's going to be so many recruitment. I could not possibly predict what the next 30 years is going to be like for recruitment. And that's what blows my mind. Like, it's such a cool space right now. There's opportunities for change and disruption. And we're the ones that get to do it and take credit for it and sort of say, that's my legacy. So, yeah, sorry, I get super excited about that.
I love it, and I completely share your vision on it. I think like we're going through like a talent transformation era where like talent will transform over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and I think we're like 2% of the way there.
Yeah.
Like it's literally we're not even scratching the surface of what is possible in terms of how we can elevate the profession, elevate the sector. So I wholeheartedly share your enthusiasm and your vision of how exciting the next 30 years can be.
Yeah.
And I hope that we can both play a very, very small part of that journey, but in our own way, and hopefully look back in 10, 20, 30 years and go, that was a really cool ride, like from where we started with that to where we've ended with it. So much has changed, and it's been so fun, and there's been such a change in the perception of how much value a really great talent function and people function can give to a business.
Yeah, and at least if we get hit by a bus and there's someone behind us who can do all this change.
Absolutely. Well, mate, that was brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Thanks for your time. I think we've earned a beer. I'm going to have a non-alcoholic beer. I don't drink anymore, but I'm sure you've earned
I'll have a nanny state with you.
Nanny state.
We'll share a nanny state.
I'll have a punk IPA, non-alcoholic, and I've really enjoyed having a chat.
It's been awesome. Thanks.
Cheers, mate.